Right, welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about second-hand clothing. So in today's video, I basically just wanted to have a quick discussion, just basically another rant video, to be honest, where I basically go through my reasoning for why I don't think fashion is a lot of the time as sustainable as people make out. This has come through me just thinking of video ideas, because obviously, if you didn't know already, I upload daily on this channel, so I'm always trying to think of new things to talk about. And some days there'll be stuff where it'll be a short video, other days it'll be a longer video, so it really just depends on how much I have to talk about. So if you do like these sort of videos, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Before we get into it, let's get into the video. So my thing about sustainable fashion is, the way I like to think about it is, I did design for a lot of years, and through that sort of process I've kind of learned recycling isn't always what it's cracked up to be. I'm going to be honest with you, it's not as amazing as people make out. Obviously it's better than just throwing stuff away, but we'll talk about it. So the first thing I want to say is, there's not just one type of recycling. A lot of people think recycling is just when you're putting something somewhere and just making it something new. There's actually, I like to think of it as three types of recycling. So I like to think of it as primary recycling, which is basically where you are just reusing the product as you kind of get it. So for example, this would be charity shops, vintage shops and stuff like that, because you're selling on the exact same thing for other people to use. Those people are recycling it, and that's why people call it sustainable clothing, because it's not harming the environment by doing what you're doing, right? But then you also have to think of secondary, which is a lot less common in clothing and stuff like that, is where basically upcycling. So it's like what I do kind of thing when I make my clothing, which I might do a video on soon at some point, which is what I get is, I get an old t-shirt from a charity shop, so something that's been primary recycled, and then I make it into something new. So it's kind of like upcycling. So I'm basically using something old and creating something new from it. Whereas primary recycling is kind of just like using something old and then reusing it the same sort of way. I'm reusing it in a different way by adding designs on, painting on it and stuff like that, and that is another type of recycling. And then you've got the final type of recycling, which is what a lot of people think about when they think about recycling just in general, which is where you are recycling it basically to make something completely new. So for example, you might recycle plastic, for example, then to make it into a plastic water bottle, for example. That's the main three types of recycling I like to think about personally. Now, it gets tricky at some point, because when people say sustainable clothing, you've got to be really careful how you judge this, right? So you've got to think, okay, sustainable clothing, meaning that it's not having an effect on the environment, or it's a carbon neutral effect on the environment, which in some ways is better than nothing, but I would always say less harm to the environment. You shouldn't try and really equal it out. It should just be try to do as less as possible, if you know what I mean. But in my opinion, that's just what I kind of think. So you've got to think, when you're doing this recycling where it's like our vintage shops and stuff like that, you've got to think, the people that are donating it to charity shops, for example, are the charity shops sending it around the country to different places and stuff like that, which is having an impact on the environment, just through travel, stuff like that, for example, like through fuel and everything like that. That is having an effect on the environment. They might send it up and down the country, you never know. And then you've also got to think, oh, okay, maybe they are delivering it straight to, the people that donate it, maybe they're just selling it in that shop, which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't really. It depends on whether it's a vintage shop, charity shop, or what kind of thing it is. I think the way it's done could be improved sustainable-wise. Vintage shopping is promoted to young people because it's meant to be better for the environment, and I think that's why a lot of people buy vintage as well, not just for how it looks, but for the perceived benefits it has on the environment by not buying anything new. Now, don't get me wrong, buying stuff from charity shops, vintage shops and stuff like that, from markets that are selling secondhand stuff, is always better than buying new stuff. Let me just get that clear out the way. It's always better than buying new stuff, because when you're buying that new stuff, the amount of energy required, the effect it has on the world is not good. And a lot of people will try and tell you that there's no global warming and stuff like that, we're not having any effects on the environment. It's not true. It's not, genuinely not true. I don't like it. But I would also say, be careful when companies are telling you that it is something good for the environment when it might not actually be. You know, like, there's a lot of publicity stunts in this world. For example, I'm not saying this is a publicity stunt, but when like Adidas made those shoes out of ocean waste and stuff like that, it's a beautiful idea and a beautiful concept, but realistically, if you looked at how much that affects the environment, I'm not sure it'd be as sustainable as they'd like to make out, because of recycling and the energy required to recycle plastic like that. It's not exactly that good for the environment. Another thing is like when people try and sell like bamboo products as like an alternative. Now, alternatives to plastic, it is a good option. However, what people don't realize about bamboo and stuff like that is when you're using bamboo, like people have bought like bamboo like t-shirts and stuff like that, you can get them woven in and stuff, but what people don't realize about bamboo is the amount of water and stuff bamboo uses and the amount of space. It basically kills everything around it that bamboo does. It might be better than plastic, but by no means is bamboo good for the environment. I can tell you that. It is really not good. And a lot of people try and make out like bamboo is very good for the environment. Really not. Like, genuinely, the amount of space it takes up, the effect it has on the surrounding environment, it's not good. And what I just would like to say in this video is, I've studied materials and stuff for a long time throughout like my studies and stuff like that. It's not what I study anymore. I study something completely different. But what I would say is, in the marketing strategies and stuff like that people are using to try and say it's carbon neutral, it's not as good as they make out for it to be. At the end of the day, a company is doing what they need to do to get people on side so they buy their stuff. And that might be beneficial to the environment, but it's not as good as they suggest it is. I've seen stuff where people say, oh, it's recycled materials we've used in that, but there still needs to be energy required to utilize those recycled materials into something brand new. So while you're not using new raw materials, you are using energy requiring it to be produced into that new t-shirt, for example. And that's one thing which I would like to say. Just because it's been recycled doesn't mean it's good. And that's one of the main reasons why I'd suggest charity shopping, vintage shopping, second-hand clothing, like off Depop, off Vinted and stuff like that, is one type of renewable fashion which genuinely is pretty much renewable. Like, you've obviously got travel and stuff like that, and everything to do with that, but you're not changing it. You're literally just giving something away for someone else to buy. And it's beneficial, for example, in charity shop situations, is why I'm such a big fan. It's beneficial to the charities, it's beneficial to the environment, and it's beneficial to you and your pockets. Is just one thing I would like to say. It's, you can always find good value for renewable sources. Like, I'm very passionate about the environment, and I don't do enough for the environment, because that's what some people might suggest. I don't personally. I could always do more. But at the end of the day, I think companies are very aware that people want environmentally healthy stuff, but they're kind of not being 100% truthful in the fact of what it actually is. I don't think it's as sustainable as they like to make out in their marketing campaign, which is obviously fair. They're trying to make money and they're trying to get as much publicity as possible for doing the quote-unquote right thing, which may seem right on the surface, but not always is, in my opinion. But that is the end of the video, guys. If you have enjoyed this one, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Genuinely does mean the world to me for everyone showing their support. And thank you so much.